Hey guys, this is Tara coming back at you. I hope you are having a brilliant start to your week. Listen, this school of hard knocks is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be a little bit heavy. And I just wanted to give people, I guess, like a little trigger warning, right? I'm going to be very raw, right? One of the beautiful things that I have come to understand, and part of my purpose is really seeking to, remove the stigma, remove the fear and the negative judgment over all of the conditions and the parts of our human experience that are less desirable, right? The messy parts, right? The chapters, that we prefer not to read out loud, that we kind of, put in the corner, put in the book and put in the corner on the shelf and, just hope that nobody finds out, right? The things we may be ashamed about when it comes to ourselves, just messy parts of life, right? And really trying to work towards, bringing into awareness, removing the stigma behind it, removing the negative judgment of it, and really, through my story, through the sharing of, the things that have gone on in my life and the change and just beautiful transformation and just so much good that has come from it, putting it out there, right? So that in my authenticity and me sharing that, that people feel free to feel, to experience, to share their own, right? And so this one's going to be a little bit raw. I've been kicking along now for a few years, right? I had this really, I call it an abrupt awakening, 4.5, 5 years. The time's running together now, especially with this last year. But, I had this really abrupt awakening. And it was after just a situation, a fallout, my life. I mean, just everything was ripped away. And it brought me to the point finally where it was like, I was done. I was gonna do whatever it took, whatever I had to do. I had enough. I had nobody else to look at but myself, right? I lost everything. Everybody around me, my whole life fell to pieces, right? And it felt so awful because, the situation itself was not even, a lot of it wasn't even true. But it's irrelevant, right? Because it brought me to a point where I hit bottom that became the firm foundation upon which I rebuilt everything. And the transformation and change, it has been, unbelievable, right? Unbelievable. And it took a lot of work. When I went in, and I spent hours, sometimes 8, 10, 12 hours a day, you guys, reading, researching, studying things. I wanted to know. I wiped the slate clean as far as my beliefs, as far as my whatever, my thoughts, judgments, how I had moved, everything. I wiped it away and I went in. There was nowhere I wouldn't seek, nowhere I wouldn't look, nothing I would not, just look into, right? Because I got to that point where I realized, like I said before, what Tara knew, what Tara was doing, it was not working, right? And over the explosive growth that I've had over the last, 5 years it's remarkable, right? It's truly incredible, and finally getting to the point where I came into my calling and kind of found my purpose, found my voice, and just found so much truth in me that unlocked a lot of what I had been seeking my whole life, and just seeking to find purpose, right? Seeking to figure out what am I here for, feeling drawn, feeling like, my whole life, feeling like I was being pulled to something that was there, but just not being able to find it, right? I mean, always going off in little adventures in my life, is it here? I was one of those people. I would just, if it looked maybe, I'd go after it, right? And through the situations, through the trials, through the going out, the failures, right? That, kind of coming to truth the way I've described it before, which was, really discovering what wasn't truth, right? What didn't work. And even in all of that, even coming into my purpose, putting things out there, and kind of just walking in this, in a much more full measure, in a much more aligned way with my calling and purpose. One of the big things I think that people I don't know if they assume, that certain people, you get to a certain point in your life and you everything just gets better. But the thing about it is, life is a process of unfolding. It's a never-ending process of unfolding, and It doesn't matter how much you know, how much wisdom you glean. There's always stuff. There's always things that are going on that will unfold, that'll unfold deeper and deeper levels. And that's really what we're here for, right? And a lot of times, like I said, the stigma behind the mess, the stigma behind admitting or talking about and just talking about the dark parts, right? And putting it out there. A lot of times it's the stigma, the fear of being judged, the fear of being rejected, the fear of what will they think, right? But I got to this beautiful point in my life where it became, it just didn't matter anymore, right? It didn't matter to me, because once you kind of unlock it, once you walk through some of the messy healing processes and unfolding things and turning the microscope inward and looking at yourself and identifying all of the things going on with you, even just being able to come to the revelation, have a revelation that, okay, you look over your life and it's like, well, you know what? The one sure thing that I could see in my own life was that I was the common denominator in all those situations, right? And so starting from there, I just, I kind of rebuilt things and I went inward. And so I want to say first and foremost that growth, transformation, unfolding, healing work, very, very deep, but very, very sacred healing work. It never ends. It never, ever ends. And that's one of the things that I find to be so divine about this experience, about my life experience, and just about life so far, is that in the way in which everything, the worst times in my life, everything, it unfolds. It unfolds, and when you go in and touch it, and see, I'm gonna get emotional. I told you guys it's gonna be heavy, but it's necessary. I'm gonna be raw about it because it's the truth. It's truth. And I want people to see it. I don't want people to be ashamed about speaking their truth or sharing their story or their struggles, right? But that's what I find to be so beautiful about life, is that you can go through the worst experiences, things that you think are going to kill you. They feel so horrible, and always come out stronger, more courageous, knowing yourself more, empowered. It's just, no matter how many times, and there has been a lot, you guys, that my life has been crashed and burned, all of it, it's always come. I've always gotten to a point, in the future after that, where I have realized why it was necessary and what I was missing and what it taught me. And so I welcome those things. I welcome those moments. I look for those moments, right? My life is spent seeking that. It's interesting because I did a video Friday or Saturday, so today's Monday, right? Last week, and I talked about projection and, just stuff that had been coming up and how we can use situations, relationship situations around us, how they're really a mirror, right? And how, everybody projects, right? The psychological phenomenon of projection is when, there's certain things going on with you that you cannot see. It's unconscious, it's in your subconscious mind, self-defeating core beliefs, paradigms, just various things, beliefs about life dynamics, just how we believe things work, this like foundational lens that was really kind of set when we were really, really young children. I mean, these things we take on unconsciously, we don't even know it, but it builds a lot of who we are and how we see things, right? And so really the rest of our, as we grow and get older, we're given an opportunity to play those things out. We're given an opportunity to learn what works, which part of that's true, to work through a lot of things that can even be passed down from, our parents' dynamics, family dynamics we see growing up, dysfunctional things, wrong ideas of relationships, of norms, of what's normal, what's not normal, even just trauma that's passed down through generations in DNA, in the bloodline. There's good research that shows that intergenerational trauma is a very real thing, meaning that, traumatic experiences of our ancestors and our bloodline, they leave marks on the DNA. It's imprinted into the DNA, and those types of physiological and biological changes can show up, right? They can show up in later generations. And so, you know, all of these things, we come into this world, and then, you know, all of these things are kind of built, and we go about things. And then when we get a little bit older, you know, we start to play them out. That's why you see a lot of times in middle school girls and into high school, or just even, you know, teenagers in general, regardless of, you know, gender, you start to see a lot of issues. A lot of times that's where kids struggle with self-esteem, with fitting in. That's why the thing with peer pressure, you know, trying to find who you are, trying to discover who you are, figuring out, you know, I believe this, but then, you know, getting, you know, going and doing something or thinking things one way, and so you play that out, and then it doesn't work for you, and having to figure out, oh my gosh, it worked for me, you know, why isn't it working? All of those things, you know, start to play out, and then as you get an adult, it just kind of unfolds. And as you go through life, you can start seeing very clear patterns of very, very, very similar fundamental patterns of different themes playing out. And, you know, when you get to a point where you can recognize one of those patterns, what you begin to discover is that these people, the situations, yes, they had different faces, different names, different specific situational details, right? When you get to a certain place, you start realizing that, like, all of that stuff, you start to begin to see how it was actually reflecting something about you, right? And so that's the process of life, guys. Life, you know, this idea that we're going to get to this place where it's going to be all perfect, or where you don't stop growing, or where, you know, it's not true, right? It's just not true, right? What it is that as you go along, as things unfold, you just become more wise. The more self-knowledge you have, the easier it becomes to maneuver through, right? And that way, when things come, it's not about you never finding yourself in a bad position again. It's not about that. It will never be about that. You will always find yourself in certain situations, but the measure of growth isn't, you know, the standard of measure, it's not measured by whether or not you find yourself in situations or not anymore, or find yourself, you know, in struggles. The standard by which you measure your growth is in how you maneuver through them, right? How you go about things, apply the lessons you learned, the wisdom, you know, and those little things, man, I'm telling you what, those are to be celebrated, right? Even the smallest little change, when you know, recognizing that I would have blown up, you know, I would have blown up and before, and I didn't this time. Those are all little changes and transformations that should be celebrated, because that's how life unfolds, right? And so, you know, a lot of people, I think, just maybe with what I do and just who I've become through, you know, the situations I've mined, and the messiness of the healing process that I've gone through, and just the very, very sacred work that comes along with truly getting to know yourself, truly being able to look at yourself and all of you, right? Your shadow, the darker sides about you, the undesirable things, diving into the guilt and shame you felt over how you behaved in the past, situations you found yourself in. It's very, very messy, but it's such sacred work. And it's in there that you become empowered. And it's such beautiful work. And so, you know, what I wanted to do today was share with you how, you know, this unfolds in very real situations. You know, yesterday, you know, I did this video a couple days ago talking about projection and just how everybody does it, right? And how you can learn so much about yourself through it when you are able to look at situations and see how you may be projecting, right? Well, you know, yesterday morning, I woke up, and when I opened up Facebook, I saw a post by, you know, in a group that an individual who was very, very pivotal in my life when I was going through this massive abrupt awakening, you know, 4 or 5 years ago, when I really wiped the slate clean and sat down and was just, I wanted to know. I ended up meeting this individual. I've told you guys I was involved in, you know, a lot of religious debate groups during a time when I was trying to find my spiritual, trying to evaluate my spiritual beliefs, trying to make sense of things and understand things in a way that resonated with me as being truth, right? And so I was heavily involved in, religious debate groups, atheist, theist debate groups, and I ended up coming across this individual, and when I tell you, when I read a couple of his responses, his concept of God, the way it was so funny, because if you saw the guy, if you saw his picture, you'd look and you were like, he's looked like a surfer dude. It looked like he just maybe kind of flew by the seat of his pants with the stuff that he said. You guys, I cannot tell you how much he was such a genius. He was so brilliant and so clear and so confident. And the stuff he would say, he always started stuff in these groups with his comments, because he was a genius when it came to formal logical debate, formal logical thought, down to using the mathematical symbols and all of the symbols within logic to be able to make arguments and defend them and explain things to people. And it was awesome, because a lot of times I didn't even understand what he was saying, but there was something about it that would I resonated with truth, right? And the comments he would make, they would go on. These debates would go on for a day and a half, 2 days, and they would sometimes be 300 comments long, where people were debating with him, right? And it was usually him versus, no joke, like 7 or 8 other individuals. And it was funny, because over time I also realized that the individuals they was kind of the same people most of the time, but they just went at it, and so much of what he said, even though I didn't understand all of what he was saying, there would always be little bits of it that I'd understand, and it was enough. It was like a catalyst. I'd go and seek out little words, something he'd say, something that would spark something in me. And y'all, I would go and start researching stuff just based on what he said. And I ended up, kind of interacting with him a little bit on a personal level, just through Facebook Messenger. He was an admin in a number of different Facebook groups, philosophy groups, and I started interacting with him, and we would bounce ideas off of each other. I remember when I was trying to figure things out, I'd throw out, and, because a lot of stuff I was coming to understand, I felt really like, it was so different than anything I had ever heard. I had never heard anybody say things like this. I'd never heard anybody express an understanding, like I was expressing. And so it was very difficult I didn't have anybody, actually. I had nobody I could fire off these things to, or share my ideas with, and just bounce it off of them to get, their thoughts, right? To have them hear it and see what they thought. I had nobody, right? And this individual became that person. And sometimes I would say it didn't matter what I said. He was always open to listen, and he would always respond with something. And even if we didn't end up agreeing on it, it never mattered, right? It never mattered, because our goal, both of our intentions, our agenda was definitely shared, in that it was just all about understanding. I mean, he would say things like, he got so much too. He would say things like, funny, because he was kind of like that, but he'd be like, oh, it's funny because you're cute and you're intelligent, right? He just would make like silly comments like that. But the point is, it was really transformational for me. It was so helpful for me, and it really helped to give me confidence, because I had this individual whose knowledge of the depth of knowledge he had, especially quantum physics, especially just mechanics of certain things. Like I said, formal debate, just his ability to think and clearly outlay things, right? To have somebody that I just was like, over, right? Like I just thought the world of him. He was brilliant. He was brilliant. And to hear somebody like that not only hear something that you have to say, but be like, oh my gosh, yeah, you know what? Okay, yeah, I see that. Okay. It was just, it was so necessary. He was such a pivotal part of that. And it was just a big part of a very difficult, messy, but beautiful and transformative, the most transformative period of my life, right? And so yesterday I woke up, and when I came downstairs, you know, I'd open up Facebook, and one of the philosophy groups that he was an admin in, one of the other admins had posted. When I opened it up, it was the first thing that was on there. And I didn't, all I saw at first was there was like a, you know, a little picture collage, right? And I saw, you know, his picture, and I'd just woken up, so I wasn't really like, whatever. But then I looked, when I saw the picture, I looked up at the group, and I was like, oh, like, that's not something they normally post in the group. And so, you know, I looked at it a little closer, and then I saw in one of the bottom pictures of the collage, it said basically that he had been missing. You know, when I originally, you know, started interacting with him, he was in Florida. He was an airplane mechanic, just self-taught too, right? And him and his friend had done a business where they ended up doing detailing for private jets. And he kind of just was one of those fly by the seat of your pants. He would drop anything and move anywhere. He'd stay somewhere for a few years and he'd go somewhere else, but he actually ended up in Oahu, in Hawaii. And so he'd been in Hawaii for a few years. I mean, actually, you know, he actually moved to Hawaii right around the time my daughter started going to school in Maui, you know, so, you know, when she's in her senior year, she started going her sophomore year. So, and, you know, he just loved it there. He loved it there. You know, we didn't really talk as much. When he got there, he kind of, you know, fell in. He was doing this really cool little retreat thing, but we'd still interact in groups. Every once in a while he'd post something, you know, on his page, and, you know, we'd chit chat or whatever about it. But, you know, I saw the pictures of that, and I saw, you know, it was a missing male, detailed descriptions. And I looked up, and when I read the caption, when I read what was in the post, the moderator, the admin, you know, they were letting it be known that they had found his body. And it was so crazy because it felt like, at the time, I mean, I actually handle death. I handle death very, very well. I have such a clear understanding in my beliefs about certain things that it's not something that I want. It's not like I'm one of those people that's like, take me now, you know. I'm not that person, but I have an understanding of things that, you know, I've lost people, I've lost friends, and I've been able to, you know, it's sad, I can grieve, but I have such an understanding that is so comforting, and it helps me move through it, right? When I read this, it felt like it felt like a block had like hit me in the chest. And I had to put the phone down because I guess maybe my mind needed to process it or whatever. And, you know, I stood up and I was like, you know, honestly, I had a lot to do yesterday. And the funny thing was, I could feel a lot of emotion coming on. And so I'm funny like that sometimes, y'all. I'm just gonna give it to you raw. I know when something's coming. I know when something is coming. I know when the layer has been pulled back and there's something surfacing. And so I actually stood up and was like, oh, I got too much to do today. I had my niece's birthday party. I just had a lot of stuff that I had to do, and I could sense, I knew something was gonna come up. It was gonna be big, necessary, but I just told myself, I stood up and I said, we got stuff to do today. We'll get through it, and then I will approach it then, right? And so I made my coffee. I was sitting there. I was intentionally trying to keep myself distracted because once I feel the pulling and the stuff, my natural inclination at this point is to go in because I want to know. Like, I want to know now, right? I'm okay with sitting through discomfort, sitting through emotion, raw emotion. I'm so comfortable with it now. Like I welcome it, right? But and it kept trying to pull a little bit. And I went upstairs and got in the shower and was getting ready. And all of a sudden, I started feeling the pull, and so I got back on my phone and I had this, I just had the thought, I want to go in and look back at the Facebook Messenger. I hadn't talked on Facebook Messenger with him in years, right? But I felt like that'll give me some, that'll put a smile on my face, right? Because it was just such great, just deep conversation. And at a time when I had nobody to listen to me, nobody that I could even talk to any of this stuff about. And when I went into my Facebook Messenger and opened it up and started scrolling down, I started scrolling and scrolling, and all of a sudden it was like, I was scrolling down a long ways, and I went back up and I went to search it, and nothing came up. And all of a sudden I remembered that years ago I deleted it. I had deleted it and I'd forgotten all about it. But y'all, the reason why I deleted it was because there was an individual in my life at the time who I didn't want to see it. I didn't want this person to see it because just because of the response and the reaction and what it would have meant. I deleted it, and when I realized that, y'all, it came flooding. It came flooding out. And what really hit me in that moment was the fact that I started looking back at all of the stuff I had done like that. All of the stuff I had given up, I had sacrificed. All of the stuff that I sacrificed in my effort to try to make things work. And this person they're not even here anymore, right? The person I did all that for, the sacrificing for, right? Thinking it was so worth it then. I don't know if it didn't work out with them. And when I had that thought, y'all, when I tell you it took every bit of my being to not fall to the floor and just start to let it come. But I had to go do this. So I let it out a little bit, washed my face again, got ready, went and did whatever. And when I came back last night, I sat down, put my headphones on and started to meditate and let it start coming up. And y'all, when I thought about all the things like that I had done and all the sacrifices I had made, relationships I jeopardized, stuff I just threw to the side, the numbers of times I shrunk myself. In an effort to make it work with somebody. And when I looked back up on all the destruction in my life, all of the hurt, pain, and just the devastation, the loss, how much I had lost. And realizing I had done all that and sacrificed all of that for somebody that's not even here anymore. It didn't work out with them. I don't know, y'all, it hit me like a ton of bricks. And as I sat there, y'all, I ugly cried. I ugly cried. Ugly cried, because that's what you have to do, right? When you have these moments, y'all, when you have these moments where you realize, like, holy shit, this whole time I thought all the stuff I was doing, trying to make this work, to help this person, right? All the stuff I was doing, I thought I saw myself, right? I believed what I was doing was good. I believed that I saw myself as like a hero, right? Like, look at what I've done for you, right? This is what friends do. This is good. This is, you know, and sitting there yesterday, you guys, I realized I wasn't, it's not heroic. Nothing I did was heroic. Nothing I did was right. Nothing I did was good. None of it. Because when I look back and realize what I sacrificed and gave up for a situation that it's a difficult truth. It's a difficult truth to bear. But it came up with a lot of guilt and shame. Like, Tara, what the hell? Like, you know what? You've done all this, you've gone through all this stuff, you all this growth, like, and you sit there and kind of question yourself, like, that's what I first did, like, kind of like, how did I miss this? How is it now? How is it these years later? How is it now? That I just now am realizing this, right? But then after I did all that boo-hooing and that letting it out and letting it flow, right? I remembered something that I said in the video Friday. It's so beautiful because that's the way it works out, right? That's why I get on here and do this, because, you know, I know it seems like I'm sharing and I'm teaching others, but every time you do that, when you're giving advice to somebody, when you're speaking to somebody else, when you're speaking to another situation, when you're doing this, when you're teaching yourself. You're speaking to yourself just as much, right? You're speaking that truth to yourself. And when I look back and thought about that video, about how, you know, about how certain things, about how people, you know, they project and they do these things because, you know, they're just not ready to deal with it. And sometimes they've got to go through certain things. They have to go through certain things and feel something so deeply that it brings it up. And when, you know, and it was that, it's when I opened up my Facebook and I saw that and remembered what's the value that had in my life and how much meaning. It was just so meaningful, and it just changed my life. And I deleted it. I deleted it for something that was temporary, and I could never get those conversations back, right? I deleted it. I could never get those conversations back. And when you get to that point, right, and the thing about it is, though, it's like I said in the video, but sometimes it takes that. Sometimes it takes having that massive realization, you know, opening up your Facebook and realizing that somebody that was such a pivotal person in a period of time, that you struggled and you had nobody, they're gone. They're gone, and realizing all of the truths and all of that, all the conversations, it's gone. It's gone, and I can't have any more, right? Can never get that back. That hitting me, that that was what I intuitively was able to recognize. What I felt, you know, it felt like a blow to my chest. When I knew something was coming up, you know, I was right. My intuition was right, and it was very heavy. But y'all, when I sat down and let it flow and started seeing and saw that, all of a sudden, I remember asking myself, like, how did I let this happen? How come now? Of all the change, all the stuff, why now? You know, but then when I look back, and all of a sudden it just started popping in my mind, situations throughout my entire life where I have always been repeating this pattern in situations and relationships, with friends, with romantic relationships, where there's always been a choice made between me and something or somebody else. And when I started looking at that and realizing that, oh my gosh, this literally plays back all the way to my teenage years. I mean, teenage years, and one of the biggest situations I have never even thought about before came up in my remembrance. You know, I remember when I was in high school, and I had this dude named Chris. Was, when I tell you, my bestie. We laughed. It was never romantic ever. It was never romantic. But when I tell you, the closeness, the authenticity, being free. I remember it was one of the relationships after I had kind of struggled in middle school, 8th grade. You know, it was one of the first relationships I had after that, where I'd come to understand things a little better, but I just felt free. I felt free. I could be me. We laughed, y'all. I mean, we were so close. We laughed. The amount of laughter and just joy. There was never any bullshit. It was just so free and just so good. And it was so needed for me as well. And I remember, you know, it was late in the junior year, towards the end of the junior year. You know, back then we didn't have cell phones, right? So, but we had phone lines. So each of us, me and my siblings, we each had a phone line that was ours. So it just was our private phone line, right? So it was, you know, later one evening, and I was in my room and my phone rang, and I answered it. It was him. It was Chris. And I will never forget, y'all. I knew he had been talking to this girl, right? I knew he had been talking to her. And it was somebody I'd known, actually. She grew up down the street from me. When I was young, right? And I knew he had been kind of talking. He said, "Oh, I think, I don't know. I kind of like her." And he was one of those people. He didn't really date a lot, right? So I could see that the prospect of a relationship was something that he was just so interested in. He just was so he really liked the feeling, right? And so, but he called me up one night. I answered my phone. It was him, and I'm like, yo, what's up? And I'll never forget, y'all, what he said to me. He said, "Tara, listen, I've got to tell you something." And I was like, "Yeah, what is it?" He's like, I can't be your friend anymore. I can't be your friend anymore. So-and-so, who is his now his girlfriend, so-and-so, doesn't like it. She doesn't like our relationship. She thinks that, we're too close. And she thinks it would hinder, our relationship. And I can't be your friend anymore. And I remember in my bedroom at the time, I had this little vanity thing with a mirror. And the phone had been sitting on the vanity thing, and I had actually walked over there to pick it up. And so I was kind of facing the window, and I remember just kind of turning and looking in the mirror and really having to sit there for a minute, because I didn't know. I knew it felt like the situation couldn't be real, My brain couldn't process it. So therefore, I was trying to figure out, I just sat there like, and then I was able to realize like, he's not joking. I know him. I know the tone of his voice. Like he's not joking. And I said, you can't be serious. I said, you can't, you can't be serious about that, right? You can't do that. And he said, no, I'm very serious. He's like, I really like her. He's like, I want to give it a try. I really like her. And I want to give it a shot. And, and I said, I was like, well, I mean, I was fighting back tears. And I just was like, well, are we going to be able, does that mean we're just not hanging out? Or he said, no. He said, not talking. He said, I can't talk to you anymore. And I remember getting upset, but just saying, okay. Like I didn't even try to fight back or try to, what, I just said, okay. And I hung up. I never said anything about it to anybody. I never told anybody about it. And obviously I just must have repressed it, right? But that impacted me so greatly. And I realized that all the situations that have showed up in my life has played out in such a similar way, where I find myself in these positions where, I think things are one way and then boom, it seems almost like out of nowhere, or just even the same thing happens. Somebody changes their mind and chooses something else or someone else. And it just kind of cast me to the side, right? And when I realized it and I let that emotion out, right? I realized why it was playing out in my life, but I realized too, like, listen, this is too intense. This is too pronounced of a pattern that I am seeing so clearly. I mean, I could go back and see other relationships in high school I had with friends. I had friends turn on me, literally out of nowhere. I remember one day I pulled up in the parking lot and somebody had just said something about me. I pulled up in the parking lot. When I opened my door, every one of my friends, nobody would talk to me. Everybody was looking at me like, and I'm like, what's going on? What's going on? And it was like everybody just got mad at me, right? And so when I started realizing, like, gosh, this situation with this friend in high school is my friend Chris. I was like, that can't be the source, right? That was a trauma. That was definitely at a time when I was consciously aware of it. I'm like, but there has to be something more, right? There has to be something. And so I cried and cried and cried. And when I could feel myself starting to be able to catch my breath again, right? The ugly crying. I was ugly crying, you guys, like ugly crying, right? But when I finally was able to kind of catch my breath, I was like, there has to be something. There has to be something deeper there, right? From childhood, there has to be something. And when I went back and started, letting that unfold, I all of a sudden remembered a point in my life where I had just been going along and not thinking about anything. And then all of a sudden, I felt like my parents were choosing my siblings over me, saw them as better than me, loved them more than me. And I haven't hit on the exact moment that happened. I'm sure it will come. But what I realized was that was my whole, when I struggled as a child in my early, and the stuff that has followed me, it has been that feeling like I was never anybody's choice, right? Feeling like if it came to an opportunity where they had to choose between me and somebody else or something else. I was never, ever the choice. But what's crazy, y'all, is when I got done crying about that, I realized that in all these situations I kept finding myself in, and all these relationships that I remained and stayed for years, y'all, years, sacrificing all this stuff for, doing all this stuff and fight, and trying to do anything I could to make it work. What I realized, y'all, was that all that stuff I gave up, all that stuff I sacrificed, it was never about them not choosing me. It was about me never choosing me. It was about me being able to sacrifice not choosing my happiness, not choosing my peace. I never chose me. I never chose my heart over anybody else's. I never chose to trust myself, my intuition. I always chose any and everybody else to, right? And when I hit that point, right? When I hit that realization in that point last night, and you can see it's still gonna process, right? Because there's a lot there. But when I hit that, it was like, oh my God. Decades of this pattern playing out. They're coming to an end. They're coming to an end. And if I can just go through this, if I can continue, right? And it's rawness. I don't even think, even with my experience over the last, 4 years or so with my transformation and knowing how incredible and just explosive transformation and how much change can happen when I get through this, unfolding this, touching this, healing this, going through this sacred work of healing it. I don't even think, with all that I know, that my brain can even imagine, that my imagination can even really truly imagine what is going to come, what good, what transformation is going to come from this. But I wanted to get on here and share this because, y'all, it doesn't end, right? It doesn't end. And this is not something to run from. This process, I'm sharing this because this isn't something to run from. This is something to run to. It's something to embrace, right? Because all of it, everything that's happening, it's there. It's trying to teach you. It's trying to show you what is going on in you, what keeps leading you to these places where the outcome to the situations, they just don't match. They don't ever turn out the way you planned, the way you thought, right? And that's what it's there to show you. That's what love is. That's what divine love is. That's what unconditional love is. It's when you're trusted, when what you put out, when everything about you, when the truth, all of the things, the stuff you cannot see in your subconscious mind, when you're projecting that out, when you are going through life and living these things, that's what love does. That's what unconditional love does. It always shows you. It never lies to you, right? Never leaves you in a situation where you will ever think that you've made it or you're there if you're truly not. It'll never, you say God, source, the universe. I say God will never, ever, y'all. God will never, ever leave you. It'll never work. And you're not being punished. When it doesn't work, it's not because you're being punished, right? When it doesn't work, it's because it's there to show you. It's there to show you there's still something, right? There's still something there. And it doesn't feel good, but y'all, it is the truest, realest, most empowering, beautiful love, right? So anyways, I kind of wanted to come on here and chat and just kind of share that with you guys because now the sun's coming out my window and I'm looking all crazy, but you know, even that, I'm gonna back up because the sun is really coming out. It was nice and sorry guys. You're gonna have to bear with me today because this is just the hot mess of this is just part of the hot mess of what's going on right now, right? But you know, yeah, but this is the real and the raw, right, guys? This is the real and the raw. This is the truth. This is how, you know, you figure things out. This is how growth happens, right? It cannot happen any other way, right? I mean, you can read all the books you want. You can listen to somebody's story. You can hear knowledge. You can even know how to do something. But the thing about it is, until you become aware of what's going on with you, until you become aware of what it is within you that you just don't know, y'all. We don't know what we don't know, right? We don't know what we're ignorant of because we're ignorant of it, right? And that's the way life works. That's the unfolding, right? Isn't being able to go through life and figure these things out by just looking at the situations around you and figuring out what doesn't work and you know, whatever. But you know, it's a process and it never stops. You never get there. And it's a beautiful thing that you don't, you guys, you know. But this is something that everybody has to embark upon, right? You have to make a decision. You have to go within, right? You can search, you can, you know, travel from here to Timbuktu. You can read every self-help book. You can do all of these things. You can listen to this video. You can watch any video. You can go to conferences. You can do all of that, right? And you can know how. But until you know, right? Until you go inward, until you go inward and look at those parts and touch those dark parts of you, touch those places of unworthiness, those repressed places, allowing yourself, right? Removing the stigma, not being scared of it, understanding the purpose, the beautiful, beautiful purpose of it, right? Until you do that, it doesn't matter what you do, right? You'll just end up finding yourself where I always did with things almost. You get glimpses of it working. You get glimpses of how good it can be. But it doesn't remain and it doesn't work out in the end, right? So I wanted to come on here and share this with you guys and just be real and raw today because that's what I'm here to do. I'm sick of the stigma. It's nothing. There's nothing wrong with this, right? I can share. I can share my imperfections, my flaws. I can share mistakes that I've made, messes that I've made, destruction that I've caused, the true realness of the hurt and guilt and shame you can feel when you come to a point in your life where you realize what you did, how your decisions, how your choices hurt people you loved, cared about deeply, right? You know, it's necessary. It's necessary. And it's so beautiful, y'all. If you can stick with it, if you can just stick with it, it's what we're here to do. It's really what we're here to do, right? So anyways, you got my snot-faced, you know, tears, the ugly, more raw, not ugly, but raw truth, right? You got a bit of that today. And, you know, I hope in honoring my truth and authenticity and honoring my story, and honoring myself, my full self, the beautiful parts, the wise parts, right? The transformed parts, but also equally honoring the parts that are still a work in progress, right? Still a work in progress, right? By honoring those equally, by honoring my full being and coming on here and doing this, I just hope that it makes you feel more comfortable in sharing in authenticity and sharing your full being, right? It's time to take those books off the shelf that have those chapters we've stuffed away that we just don't want to read, right? We just would prefer not read aloud. It's time to read them out loud. It's time to read them out loud and become empowered through them, right? So anywho, as many of you know, I do empowerment coaching, right? And it's along these lines, right? I'm not gonna come in and tell you what to do. I'm not gonna tell you, oh, here's your 5 steps to whatever, right? It's just really about sparking certain things in you, right? And helping you come to ways to better understand and become more self-aware. And so if you're interested in setting up a session, you can check out my website, www.reintegratedwellness.com. You can also email me at reintegratedwellness@gmail.com. I appreciate you. I know this went a little long, but I appreciate y'all sticking with me through this because, I just want you to know that everybody has struggles. Everybody. It doesn't matter how good they looks, right? It doesn't matter how they're standing on a stage with 60,000 people listening to them teach, paying money to come, hear what they have to say. Everybody has shit. Everybody has shit, right? And if we got more authentic and more comfortable and just realized that, I know it can feel like you're so isolated, like it's just so unique to you, like nobody would understand. But if we can open our eyes to realize that everybody, we're not different, we're the same. We're not different. We're not different because we did dumb shit. We're not different because we made poor choices. We're not different because we destroyed our lives. We're not different because we broke somebody's heart. We hurt our kids unintentionally with our decisions. It's not what makes us different, right? That's not, our mistakes are not what makes us different. It's what makes us the same, right? And if people would stop being so scared to share that, the stigma's got to go. We've got to kill this whole narrative, kill the whole narrative that, that has us negatively viewing the truth. The truth as being a bad thing, right? One of the sayings I love is, if it can be destroyed by the truth, then it should be destroyed by the truth. And we should want that. Who wants to spend their lives walking around in fake situations? It's not, who wants to walk around pretending, you have to walk around pretending that all this stuff is not true about you, carrying on this version of you, playing this role, wearing this mask that you think, yeah, people may like you. Yeah, you may, whatever, but you're never going to find satisfaction in that, right? It's not going to work out, like I said, because it's not supposed to, right? It's not supposed to, right? Because it's not truth. Truth will make you free. Truth will make you free, right? So anyways, thank you guys for hanging with me. I will be jumping back on here again soon. Probably not to dump all of this on you guys, but I'm sure I'll see you soon. I hope you have a brilliant remainder to your afternoon. Thanks.